I just want to preface this video by saying it's a complete shit show. This video, it goes off the rails. It's a little off piste, and it's quite frankly not my best work. The more you watch, the worse it gets. But in all honesty, looking back at it, I think that's kind of fitting considering what I have to say about this film. So enjoy or don't. It might send you to sleep. But anyway, here we go. When logging my watch of Shang-Chi on Letterboxd yesterday, as all good film nerds do, I noticed an incredibly accurate and poignant review from Patrick Willems. He simply says Shang-Chi is another Marvel movie that would have been twice as good if it had cost half as much. And that pretty much summed up my post-movie thoughts in a sentence. Because when I stepped out the cinema, my first thought was, if only that wasn't a Marvel film. You see, I love Marvel, I've grown up my whole childhood with it, but the MCU is encountering an all too predictable issue, which I want to go further into in another video, but for now, I'll just say that it's becoming too formulaic and almost has to keep reminding the viewer this is an MCU film with such a lack of subtlety. The first half of Shang-Chi was fun, it was trendy, it was upbeat, and it felt cool, smooth, fresh. The soundtrack was right on tone with a beautiful score and some high tempo music for the fights. I was sitting there with a smile on my face. This was really quite fun. The bus fight had some of the best hand-to-hand combat I've seen in the MCU thus far, and it was by far the hardest scene in the whole film. All the cast did brilliant jobs of portraying these characters, and instantly I was on board with their charisma and screen presence. The colour grading was better, to be honest, than it had been in previous MCU films, with more vibrance than the usual greyed out MCU feels, so for that I was thankful. Watching the family drama plotline play out was interesting. In fact, I found that in itself more gripping than any of the magic or crazy fantasy action that takes place later on. The father-son dynamic created was emotionally strong compared to a lot of the other relationships in previous Marvel installments. It felt real, it felt personal, and it felt anti-Marvel. Sure, the dad is an evil 1,000-year-old international terrorist and conqueror, but it still felt more grounded and human than a lot of Marvel's work. But it does go wrong, it loses its sense of being a smaller character-focused story and suddenly becomes what Marvel are all too notorious for: a giant CGI fest mess. What happens in the final act is nothing short of a shame, because it stands as a reminder that this is an MCU installment, and as such it will be bursting with what I like to refer to as a VFX orgy, except instead of resulting in wonderful visuals, you just get what feels and plays out like a video game cinematic. Instead of bringing the whole film's plotline to a satisfying conclusion, it's just a fistfight between Shang and his dad, which just ends up in his dad being killed off by a giant world-ending dragon, which just happens to explode onto the scene, and then suddenly it's all about killing this dragon, which happens very quickly with minimal consequences, and then it's all just wrapped up immediately like that. It's just too much. It's classic Marvel fashion to feel like everything needs a gimmick, everything needs some high stakes action or it'll be boring. The reality is, at least in my eyes, the polar opposite, because this third act completely lost me, and when I turned to my mate sitting next to me when the credits started rolling, we both agreed that a film that felt so promising and grounded for an MCU flick just ended up disappointing for the usual damn reasons. At the risk of sounding overdramatic, CGI in modern blockbusters is genuinely a plague. It's never needed to the extent that the film studio think it is. Even if practical effects can't achieve the same scale of explosion, they still look 100 times better. Take Tenet, for example. Every time there was a fight scene in Shang-Chi, the best moments were when it wasn't plastered in CGI. when the people fighting on screen were actual humans and not just computer-generated graphics. Every time they switched to CGI so that a character could pull off some amazing stunt, it just pulled me out of the action. So this brings me back to the title of this video. Shang-Chi suffers from being a Marvel movie, because if it didn't feel the need to stuff itself full of CGI and Marvel trademarked humour, if it had drawn more focus to the stunning... Let me try that one again. If it had drawn more focus to the stunning score and brilliant choreography, if it had stuck with the family drama following these new, exciting characters and given them a humble introduction as the origin story it is, I think this really could have been up there with Marvel's best. And I know you can point at any film and say that if you took out the flaws it would be better, yeah, duh. But there was just something about how Shang-Chi stumbled at such an annoyingly Marvel hurdle that left me feeling not exactly disappointed or sad, just frustrated. But hey, Spider-Man is just around the corner. There won't be much CGI in that. Yeah, it'll be grounded, it'll be small scale. I'm sure Disney's got it figured out.